Well, better than negative.
Right. Correct. Exactly.
I'm trying to keep my account in the positive if I can.
That's all. But yeah, when you take off for a month, it's kind of difficult to monitor what's going on, you know?
Well, hopefully, if you're taking off, you're removing yourself from that chore.
Say it again?
Hopefully, if you're taking off, you're removing yourself from that chore.
No, no, I don't. I'm still engaged. I
There's no
make,
such thing as vacation.
right. Yeah. My wife, because she's a business owner, she's learned to kind of cope with it. You know,
She she gets it, I guess.
she got it the first time I met her. Well, it was the second time I met her. She was on the back of my motorcycle crying the blues about how two girls quit and her income was going to drop off the edge, you know?
Wow, the screen reflects right off your glasses.
Yeah, I see that. I see that. If I go without my glasses, I feel like I'm lost, you know?
Well, we don't want you to get lost.
I really charm. All right. Yeah. All right. Now you're just a blur, but that's fine. It's only conversation.
So, what do you remember about? I mean, when we met, we were 3 years old. That was a very long time ago. What do you remember about that first meeting, if anything?
Zero. The only thing I remember was even remotely remember about being that age is being introduced to snow and not really being excited about it.
You weren't into snow,
No, and as much as it makes me money, and it's a great way to make a living for a lot of people. I can see why people move to Florida,
huh? Oh yeah,
right? So yeah, I think I remember vaguely, like my hands, because you remember I always had problems with the circulation of my hands,
yeah.
right?
Do
They
you think it
turn
was
white,
cold out?
huh?
You're saying it was cold out.
Cold,
We
and
met on a cold and dang day.
I just remember not being, probably even crying about the
Wow,
snow because I just did not like anything about it at that point in my life.
you had just moved back from Virginia at that point, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Navy baby.
All I remember is, you know, I've been living in the house since I was 6 months old, so
Yeah.
I've been there. And my my two cousins were still living with us, right? My family was on the first floor, and my aunt and uncle and my two cousins were on the second floor, and they were both older than me. Leanne was 2 years older, and Scott was 4 years older, but they were kind of my playmates because my sister was 6 years older.
Right.
And then I get this friend right next door who was the same age as me, and I just remember I remember the introduction.
You
I don't
do.
I do. Um, I don't remember what the weather was. None of that. I just remember that somebody was telling me, you know, this can be your friend, and that's just stuck with me my whole life.
Hmm. You remember the location? Like, what was it in the living room?
It was outside front of your great grandparents' house in the driveway, if I remember right. That's why you were probably cold.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
would have been probably thinking about the weather because I grew up in it.
Right. Oh, yeah. No doubt. And
Yeah.
you're saying that introduction happened when we were three, and you remember it.
Yes.
Wow. You're good, Earl.
I don't remember a lot
Mm.
more than that at that age. I remember, I was a very egotistical, impatient little kid that wanted what he wanted, and you had your own way. And if I went over the boundary you were willing to accept, you just turned around and went home and left me there.
I remember that part. I do remember that part. I also remember, and I don't remember the age I remember Ginny being above the kitchen. And I remember those stupid eyelash tools that she had and we go prowling in there and taking over the space, and she's like, "Get out of here." I remember her constantly kicking us outside. I remember you having more toys than any kid in the neighborhood.
Did
You know,
I?
I remember you had all the cool songs on that stupid little
Oh, those.
the record player.
Well, that I inherited from my older sister, right?
Is that what that was?
Of course. Almost everything I got was secondhand.
Come on, dude. You had a John Deere tractor.
That was hers.
No way.
Yes.
Okay.
The John Deere tractor was hers.
Okay.
Remember the Jeep?
I don't remember the Jeep.
We had a Jeep with the pedal car. You sat in it and it had the pedals up front and you would pedal it. And that thing was falling apart, when I was little, because she had it when she was little. And then there was that little teeny bicycle that we learned how to ride bicycles on. Remember? We would lean it up against. My father had built that utility trailer, and we would lean the bicycle up against the utility trailer in the yard, and we would just start pedaling until we fell down. And then you went and got the brand new bicycle with the training wheels. And I'm like, what's up with that? John gets training wheels and I have to fall down in the yard?
Yeah, I do remember that part. And then I remember practicing without the training wheels. My great-grandfather
Eventually came off, yeah.
My great-grandfather's car was parked in the driveway. And we did the same thing there, where we leaned our bicycles up against the car and pushed off and practiced pedaling down the driveway.
We spent more time falling off of bicycles when I was growing up. Bicycles were everything for us, right?
I remember either you got a board game or I got a board game of the comic heroes. Captain America, Superman. It was a board game of some sort, and we immediately destroyed it because we were always making capes and doing all that cool stuff,
Right.
And
your blanket had a hole in it, and we pulled it over our head.
Right. And
she was constantly sewing those back together and angering me because I'm like, why does she keep ruining my capes? She thought she was helping me, to sew up this hole in my blanket, and I'm like, no, that's my cape.
Well, eventually we graduated to the fact that we could actually ride bicycles on our own. I don't know if you remember that German Shepherd that was in the backyard too.
The one that was always trying to bite you?
King. It was Terry's dog or somebody's German Shepherd. I was afraid of the freaking thing.
You got very comfortable with that dog because when I came over to your house, you would hold it back so I could get into the back door without getting bit.
Okay.
Every once in a while, you'd let that dog go, so I had to run up the stairs.
That sounds about right.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But I remember riding in a circle. I don't know if it was you, me, and Arthur, but there was definitely at least a third person, if not four people, maybe Steven, where we would ride around in a circle in the driveway of my great-grandparents and try to knock each other out of the circle.
We did have a lot of kids all about the same age, right? Because Arthur was my foster brother, and he was the same age as us. And then Steven was across the street from me, and he was the same age as us.
Okay.
So we had a pretty good group of
Yeah.
boys to get in
Yeah.
trouble with.
And the funny part is, I drive around now and I see these kids being dropped off. There's a train of cars blocking the street where parents are driving their kids to these schools. And I'm thinking to myself, as a taxpayer, why am I paying for school buses? So I can have parents blockading the road, right? But in our day, our parents walked us as kindergarteners, and we were on our own after that. We
The
always,
first day they walked us all the way down there,
yep,
and it was, I don't know, half a mile maybe.
definitely half a mile.
And at 5 years old, we were doing that every day. But it's not like we were doing it by ourselves. Everybody in the neighborhood that went to elementary school was walking down there in packs.
Correct. But that's all disappeared now. Now they get a ride.
You either take the bus or mom drops you off, and there's a huge long line of cars, kids trying to get out. Yeah, there's none of that.
Yeah. So,
But it's not like there wasn't people doing bad things to children back then, because I can remember being taught don't take candy from strangers. Well, why would they
right.
teach you that if there weren't strangers trying to snag children with those types of tricks?
Correct. No, I get all that. There was definitely bad. I'm not saying that bad things weren't happening. It's just a matter of we were allowed a lot more liberty to develop and find our way.
The strange part is I don't really remember being allowed to leave my yard without permission until I was 10 years old. So for 5 years, they felt comfortable me walking a half a mile to school.
Mm.
But when I got home, I couldn't leave the yard without permission.
Yeah.
Make sense.
Yeah, well, that's the rules,
The rules are the rules.
The rules are the rules are the rules. You knew the rules. The consequences that went along with not following the rules.
But then you moved. Where did you move the first time?
I was trying to think about that.
You were about 6. You weren't there very long.
Mom found an apartment on Broad Street.
Was it Broad Street?
Yeah.
So I remember I only went there once.
It was god awful. It was a big, huge one of those. It was on the corner of Broad Street and Liberty.
Really?
And when you go up the hill, it's on the left-hand side. And I remember hanging out on the back porch, just trying to have some fun outside. And the column holding up the porch broke free and knocked me out.
Oh, brother.
I
missed that one.
Or at least knocked some sense into me, one or the other. Yeah.
You're out, one or the other.
Yeah. But I mean, I was there, and then my mom was always, dating the police officers and this and that.
Yeah.
I remember ended up going to another apartment building. We moved more than we stayed.
You guys did, but the next place I remember you was over down Wood Street, right?
No, that didn't. Did that happen that quick?
That's what I remember. I mean,
that was 10 years old, Earl.
Yeah, I know.
You know why? Because I got a paper route. That's the only reason why I know that. So we didn't.
Did that happen as soon as you moved there?
Huh? I bet. Yeah.
I don't know. There must have been a gap.
I might have lived. I might have lived before that. I don't know if you remember Jim and Cheryl. The heck with their last names. Jeff Spencer.
Yeah.
Right behind Jeff Spencer on Cook Avenue.
Really?
Yeah. The Jim was, had quite a few.
Jimmy Graham?
Graham. Jim and Cheryl Graham.
That was Arthur's friend.
Okay.
Yeah, he was big buddies with Jimmy, and then Jimmy had that little brother Dennis.
Yeah.
He was literally Dennis the Menace.
Okay. I stayed clear. I hung out with Jeff. That's where I met Jeff, and I started doing bowling on Saturday mornings.
Okay, and
That
then I
had to
started
be,
going with you.
huh?
Then I started going with you.
Okay.
Were you in the same house as Jimmy Graham?
Yes. I was on
Okay, I do remember that.
the second floor.
Okay, and that's how you became. Yeah, and I used to go bowling with you guys.
Okay.
Your mother drove us. Yeah,
Yep.
and then you moved over to Wood Street,
Then I moved over to Wood Street.
and you got the paper route, and then like a year later, I got the paper route,
Correct.
and we did that for quite a while.
And you bought your paper route, right? You had to pay it.
I had to pay for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
$1 a customer
Yep.
from.
I started off with 34 customers.
I had like 30.
And then I bought another paper route from somebody else. I don't know who. But it must have been the company calling me and asking me if I wanted to, somebody was getting ready to retire. Did I want to take over that route?
Oh,
So
okay.
I doubled it. By the time I built that thing, because remember they used to run promotional things?
Yeah.
Like if you get 10 new customers, you go
I
through this
never did that.
brochure. Huh?
I never did that.
Really?
You were okay going around knocking on doors and strangers. Me, I had nothing to do with it.
Dude.
I'd rather pay $1 a customer than knock on a single door.
I had to have stayed on Flower Street because I remember Jupiter's closing and I wanted to play guitar. And Mom brought me down to Jupiter's, which was on the corner of Colony and West Main. It was a department store where they had the soda dispensers and all that stuff in the front.
Yeah.
And they had shopping in the back. And they were closing. That's all I remember. And cards, holiday cards, they were just general cards. And there were a whole table of them. Mom said, you want to be able to buy yourself a new guitar? I'll buy all the ones that are on this table. You walk around and selling them. So that's where I learned how to be knocking on people's doors and selling them.
I never would have had it because I never would have done that. I hated
25 cents, 25 cents a box. I sold them for $1. 7-year-old knocking on your door saying, do you want to buy greeting cards?
For $1. Back then, that was a lot of money.
Yeah, but people were like, as soon as they looked at a 7-year-old kid showing up to have the tenacity, right?
Well,
you see kids now, they're sitting out there. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a guitar.
All right.
And then Mom paid for the guitar lessons. But the problem was the teacher was god awful.
Yeah.
God awful. And you know me, I get bored easily.
Yeah.
My wife, she picked up the guitar. She had a crappy teacher. And then you introduced her to Frank.
Yeah. Good teacher help makes a big difference.
Oh, she's freaking blossoming now. They're actually going to be doing an actual live gig. They're getting paid. They're doing it at a restaurant in July. So I'll give you the date later. But yeah, professional gig.
Yeah, she's doing a lot better than I am. One thing that you and I never really got in trouble together.
Oh, not for nothing, Earl. You are like, I always said to you, you are the most Christian person I know. And I know you don't like hearing that.
I don't have a problem with it.
But it's just, you are the right hand guy. And when I hung out with you, you're right. We're not going to go doing dumb stuff.
The one thing I remember, though?
What's that?
The time we broke your bed.
Jumping on it?
Yes.
I do remember
was so mad.
I don't remember when or why, but I do remember doing that.
Actually, it was your idea.
I'm sure.
You're like, hey, I got this bed, and look, you can jump up and down on it. I'm like, really? Okay. So I get up and I'm jumping up and down on it. Next thing you know, boom. It's like, oh no.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? That's the
She shouldn't
beauty.
have left us alone.
There you go.
She left us
So,
alone way too
I'll be
long.
honest with you. What I remember when the girls started coming around. What was that? Vicky?
Oh, you mean in high school?
No, definitely.
Vicky.
Yeah, that blonde girl.
Yeah, that was high school.
That was high school?
That
Okay.
was freshman year.
That was freshman year. Okay.
Jimmy McGurn, right?
Yeah, he introduced you to him.
Oh, come on. Jimmy would call me out of the blue all the time, right? He lived across town, so we never saw each other too much, but he would call me and he got one of those phones back in the 70s that had the three-way,
Yep.
so he could call me and then he could call. So
Yep.
he'd call one of these girls, and Jimmy was always flirting with somebody, he was that tall, cute guy, so he had the personality. So he'd get the girls on the phone and then he'd call me and he's like, Earl, I want you to meet Star and talk to Star. And I'm like, okay. I almost never met these girls. But every once in a while, I would either go over across town to Maloney to a dance, or he would come over to Platt to a dance. And the same thing would go on at the dance. Jimmy would always find somebody, right? And this time, I don't remember if it was Platt or Maloney. It must have been Maloney because Janet went to Maloney. And he met Vicky and Janet and introduced me to them. And I kind of hit it off with the two of them. And that was one of the few times when somebody that Jimmy introduced me to, I actually had some kind of a relationship with going forward.
Right.
Other than when we went to summer camp. Because every time we went to summer camp, the moment we got there, Jimmy would scope out the three best looking girls, pick the best looking one for himself, and then hand one off to me and one off to Arthur. Like, here you go. We're going to have girlfriends, and this is the one for you, Earl. And I'm like 11, and I'm like, I have a girlfriend?
Yep.
That was Jimmy.
I know. No harm, no foul.
No, I wasn't complaining. I was just, a little clueless.
That was Jimmy.
He was very popular with the girls, I have to admit.
Yeah.
What was it? What is he, like 6'3"?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just as he just didn't care. He was he would just
You
whether
Yeah.
you wanted to talk to him or not, he was talking to you.
Yeah.
And that's just Jimmy in a nutshell.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, he never did any well, that's not
He
good.
was always good to me. Jimmy
Yeah.
was always a good friend to me.
Yeah.
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 My mom didn't like me to go over and see Jimmy because she said he's always in trouble. But I said, Mom, he's not in trouble when he's with me. So why don't you give him those few moments when he's not in trouble?
Right.
And then she'd relent and I'd get to go over.
Right.
But that's how I was able to go over. Because I'm like, hey, he might be in trouble most of the time, but not when he's with me.
And the other memory I have is that you could swim better than me.
Swim?
Yeah.
I was a fish.
Yeah. I
I
used to watch
love the water.
you and your father diving off of the rock at Wolf's Den, I think it was.
Quiet Oaks.
Quiet Oaks.
Yeah.
Well, it's Wolf's Den now.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they just shut it down.
No.
It's out in Willimantic somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on the main boulevard. I don't
Oh.
remember exactly where. I go by it every now and then when I'm on the motorcycle. It's a nice motorcycle ride area.
So we never really had the interest in the same girls except for one time.
Oh boy.
You know who that was?
No. Let me think about hold on, give me a minute.
First, I was interested in her, and I told you about her, and then the next thing I know, you're with her, and I'm like, John, what the hell are you doing?
I must have obviously liked her as well.
Obviously.
I'm trying to think of who it was though. All right, I'll go down the list.
There couldn't be a list where I was on the same list. There's only one. Only
Only
happened
one,
once. And you know she was blonde,
of course,
blue eyes,
of course.
really cute.
Sue Starrett.
No, that she was totally yours. This was before Sue, I think.
Before Sue.
It was short lived.
Oh, maybe Vicky.
No. Vicky, everybody liked, but nobody got.
Maybe that cheerleader girl. It wasn't her, right?
Yeah, Alicia.
Alicia Hall.
Yeah.
God,
That's the only one that we ever collided on.
that was definitely a mess up too. On my
Well, that's
part.
what you said. She's like, "Oh, Earl, because I mentioned it to you, and you're like, she's, you didn't miss anything."
That's probably what I said.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not the point. I wanted to."
I know.
Hey,
I
it's
know.
it takes two, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously, one.
I don't. She was cute. She was a cheerleader. How can you not?
Very cute,
Right?
very cute.
Yeah. And I mean, her personality. I mean, oh,
I didn't have a lot of people that I ever like was friends with that we both went after the same girl ever. It only
right.
happened like one other time that I remember. Jeff Porter and I,
Oh,
we used to go to the what do you call it? Junior achievement
yep.
meetings.
I remember that.
And we went to this one, and there was this one girl named Diane that we both had a crush on, and we're both flirting with her. And after the meeting, Jeff's like, Earl, what's going on? I like that girl. And I'm like, well, I like her too. I said, may the best man win. That one I won,
Okay.
if you want to call it that. Didn't
Yeah.
really go anywhere.
Well, that's what I mean. At that age,
She was
things.
kind of a free spirit. She wasn't really looking for
Yeah.
we had a good time. She's the one that came to my 18th birthday party, if you remember.
No.
Do you remember my 18th birthday party?
Was that your 18th?
Yeah. Jenny had an apartment on Broad Street.
Oh, yes, I do. I remember
That was
that.
a great party, right?
Brad?
No,
Brad?
Brad, she was already divorced by then.
Wait a second. Frank had to be there then.
Frank was definitely there. I got pictures from that party. You were there. Sue Sterrett was there. Gavin Switek was there. Mike, I forget his last name, was there. He was on my swim team with me. Rich Herms was there.
Oh,
Frank,
geez.
obviously. Yeah.
All right, so this was, give me an idea of where that apartment was.
So on Broad Street, if you go up Hall Avenue and bang the left, it was down that way on the left a ways,
Okay.
kind of up on a little hill.
That one I totally spaced. I remember being at the one where Brad was there.
For my birthday.
No, it wasn't your birthday. It was some event that we went over there.
Yeah, this was my actual 18th birthday.
Beads hanging down in the doorways and all that stuff. The kind of the beatnik.
Yeah,
Brad was all about that.
yeah.
Dude.
That was a good party. That was one of my favorite parties. Jenny had the apartment. She let me have the apartment for my 18th birthday. you guys all came over. Pretty sure we had a keg of beer. Not that that mattered to me because I didn't drink.
I know.
Jeff Porter was definitely there, and Diane and I disappeared into a room for a while. But there was some bad stuff going on there.
Bad stuff?
Well,
Allegedly?
allegedly, yeah. The next morning, I wasn't feeling too good. I stayed overnight, and like Jenny's house was trashed, right? And she's like, "Well, I told you if I let you use my apartment, you're gonna have to clean it." And I'm like, "No, you're right." And so I'm like not feeling good the next day, and I am. I remember. I mean, there was like cake pounded into the floor in the kitchen.
Oh no.
It's just really. And I'm trying to clean it, and I think she finally got feeling bad for me and helped me.
Oh my God, Earl. Oh my God. Why does that not surprise me?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as long as I didn't have anything to do with the allegedly bad stuff that was going on.
I don't remember a lot from that day, to be honest with you.
Okay, all right.
I remember that we did it, and I was really excited about it. Um, my 18th birthday was on a Saturday, and I was on the swim team, right?
Yeah,
And that was my senior year, and I had made the states. I qualified for states, but I knew that I qualified, but I was not good enough to do anything.
right.
Um, so I'm like, states were on my birthday,
Oh
so I
no,
had so I had two choices. I could postpone my birthday party. You only turn 18 once, right?
right,
And or I could go to the states, which is a once in a lifetime thing, but just to lose, like probably immediately.
right.
Um, I'm like, I'm having the birthday party.
I felt the same way about the prom.
Yeah, the prom was on your birthday.
No,
Oh, okay.
just why bother?
Oh, I liked going to those things.
I know
It
you
would
do.
have been nice to have gone to them, with you, but I it didn't bother me that you didn't go.
Right,
Um, I had other friends in high school, and I just,
right, right.
went
Yeah,
with
I
them.
wasn't going. I wasn't going to those events. That was all you and the clickety click people.
Well, the people that I went with weren't clickety click people. They were kind of outer rim people like me.
Right,
But there was definitely clickety click people at it. But you
right,
know,
right.
we had a good time. We
The
had a
only
good time.
time, the only time I want to hang out with anything to do with school, especially Platt High School, no disrespect, was graduation party.
Yeah.
The graduation party, and then of course they had a beautiful place paid for, the Elks in downtown Wallingford. Nice place, get to do everything, and somebody, and I hate to think it was Rich Herms, but there was somebody went in and just totally trashed the bathroom,
Allegedly.
allegedly, and they threw us right the f out of there. They didn't even hesitate. They didn't even wait for like the end of the thing, the end of the night. They just said the party's over. I think it was 10 o'clock. The party started at 8. It was over at 10.
See, the problem is when you're a kid,
Mm,
you only think to the moment, right? You don't think what's going to happen 3 steps down the road. But
right.
I was the kid that always thought 3 steps down the road.
Absolutely.
So people would come up with a plan. I would think it through and say, no. I would only say yes to plans I knew we could get away with.
Right. I know. I
And
know.
so that's why we didn't get in trouble when we hung out.
Right.
But when I wasn't around, there was always some stupid shit going on that you would get caught up in.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then I'd find out about it afterwards, and you tell me all the detail.
Well, that night we got kicked out of the Elks. We ended up putting a keg in the back of my van,
The van.
and we drove over to the sand. I don't know if you ever went to the dunes.
I don't think I ever did.
Really?
Were you hanging out with like the South Marion kids?
No, it was Billy Beeson, Rich
Oh,
Whitaker.
those clowns.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, all the other allegedly things.
Yes. The alleged crew.
Yeah. And maybe, no, that was, and so,
You were
yeah,
living over on the other, like on Grove Street then, right?
Goodwill Avenue.
Goodwill, right? Goodwill.
Goodwill Avenue.
Um,
And so here I am. I'm
so we
driving
were
the
far
van.
enough away from each other by then. You know, that was a good 1.5 miles, 2 miles at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. But
That you
you
were.
weren't driving?
I never got my license until I was almost graduated from high school.
Oh,
So you would be out and about with the kids that actually lived in that neighborhood. And I was only around when I decided to either walk over or ride my bicycle over there.
right. Right. But this was graduation. You didn't go to the graduation party?
I don't think I went with you.
All I remember is we went to the sand dunes.
I don't even
We
remember.
had fireworks in the back of the van.
Sand Dudes in Meriden?
No, and the sand dunes were where they're building, are actually building right now, condominiums. This is how many years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, whatever. 40 something years later. Yeah.
What town?
Right in Cheshire.
In Cheshire. Okay.
Yeah. You get off 691 exit in Cheshire, and in the back there, it was all industrial park. They called the sand dunes. So I don't know why I would thought it was cool to take the van down there, but I did.
Okay.
And we're down there shooting off fireworks, drinking a keg of beer after we got kicked out of the graduation party. So we got the keg in the back, we got fireworks, and plus whatever alleged things. And all of a sudden, 5-0 shows up. Now, by this time, Rich Whitaker is puking.
All you're doing is like lighting everything on fire, including fireworks, and you're like, huh, police? Why would they come here? You're like inviting them.
So we end up, they show up, and I'm like, listen, I'm not drunk.
Yeah.
I'm all legal. I'm thinking I'm legal. And all of a sudden he runs my driver's license, and he goes, I can't give this back to you. I'm like, what do you mean you can't? You took it from me. Of course you're going to give it back to me. And he goes, it's under suspension.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. He says, I can't even let you drive this vehicle out of here. Now, Rich Whitaker, when the cop shows up, is literally hanging his head out the back of the van, puking.
Uh-oh.
And he says, well, I think you're going to have to let that guy drive. You have a license? And Rich says, yep. And here he was, totally trashed from the graduation party.
And he's the one that's got to drive.
And I threw him in the driver's seat so he could get out of there. And I remember him sideswiping branches going down the road with the van.
This is all allegedly.
Allegedly. And I don't know if you remember that van, but the column shifter was broken. So I had to shift it on the floor directly to the transmission. I had linkage.
Well, that makes sense, because why would you have a van that wasn't like that?
Right.
So
I knew how to shift it, right?
But he didn't.
So I sat behind the driver's seat and shifted while he drove.
Well, he had a clutch.
Yeah, he had the clutch. I'd say pushing the clutch, going to second, pushing the clutch, we're going to third. That's how we got home.
Well, you made it.
Yeah, here to tell about it.
I'm just surprised the cops let him drive.
Yeah, I was too. I was very impressed. He had a legit driver's license.
It was a different time.
Yeah, you could throw somebody drunk and allegedly drunk
Right.
in the driver's seat, and everything was okay. It's better than the guy driving with a suspended license.
Luckily, things are different now.
Yeah, nobody's driving. You're getting towed.
Yeah.
Pretty
Which
soon
is probably better.
pretty soon you'll be getting deported.
All right. I think on that note, we should call it a night.
Yeah.
That was a good one. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.